I am Herman Fauntleroy, and I'm with the Petersburg Oral History Project. I shall be interviewing Mrs. Thelma Bethea concerning the civil rights era or civil rights struggle as far as Petersburg, Virginia is concerned. Mrs. Bethea is a Petersburger and attended Petersburg Public Schools, graduated from Peabody High School, which happens to be the oldest African-American public high school in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Mrs. Bethea, you were quite involved in the civil rights struggle as far as Petersburg is concerned, and worked with a number of persons and a number of students. What recollection do you really have in reference to the civil rights period as far as your life is concerned?
What I can remember at that particular time in the late 50s and early 60s, that the nation was very connected. And under Martin Luther King's guidance, there was a lot of love and a lot of organization. In Petersburg, the organization went by wards, and each ward had a ward leader. This ward leader would get people that they knew would carry out the instructions of contacting people for meetings. And it first started that we were meeting in homes. And you could just call, the ward leader could just call a person and say, call 5 people. And at that time, everyone was loyal to each other. It was just a wonderful feeling to be working in the movement. And I got just a great feeling about that movement still today.
Do you have any specific reaction to all that took place that you just described?
Yes, I do. On the trip to Washington, when Martin Luther King made the speech, "I Have a Dream," it was just the most wonderful feeling when we arrived there early in the morning. And the song was ringing all in the air when the buses pulled up. "We shall overcome." And as we gathered around the Lincoln Memorial, I saw many movie stars that I had never seen in person. And it was thrilling, and even the long walk, well, you didn't get tired. And there were older people there, even in wheelchairs. It was the most exciting thing I think that I have seen in my lifetime. And it gave you such a wonderful feeling that you were there.
As a part of what you've been describing and in the city of Petersburg, do you recall any incidents of any type that took place when citizens in Petersburg were involved in the struggle?
Yes, I can. One incident, there was a clothing store, very upscaled clothing store for women on the corner of Sycamore and Washington Street. And the name of that store was Spiro's. And as the picketers went to picket around Spiro's, they said they would never hire an African American. At that time, we were called Negroes, that they would not hire a Negro as a salesperson. And they picketed around Spiro's, and when they did, as I said, that it was a togetherness. No Negroes went into that store. So the first person that they hired, they did hire a Negro, and she has passed away now. And her name was Gladora Harding, was the first person hired by Spiro's. The store is no longer there now.
Did all of this have any particular impact on you as an individual?
Yes, it did, because I was so thrilled when we were able to put a picket line around stores and then accomplish the point of one of us being hired. It was just a thrill that you had. It's hard to describe the feeling that you had, because we knew at that time that we were accomplishing something, and something that was supposed to have been rightfully ours anyway. So it was a great feeling.
I know that you have children. They're not children, so to speak, at this point in time, I know, but they were growing up at that time. Was there any particular impact that all of this had on your children at that point in time?
Well, it seems as though only two of my children, only one of my children really got a lot. I think my oldest daughter, she went to Peabody, and then she went to, when she graduated from Peabody, I think they had changed it. She became a teacher, and she wound up teaching at Peabody and Petersburg High. My other two kids, it was like in an integrated situation. But it didn't, I never had too much problems with the system and my kids.
When the school system was integrated in the city of Petersburg, do you recall any situations that developed as far as the students were concerned at that time, as they came together in one setting?
Yes, I had one experience that I didn't like at all, and like all parents that care for their children, they try to protect them, and they really don't want them to be mistreated. My youngest daughter was going to Virginia Avenue School, and she was kind of obese, and at recess time, they told the kids they could chew gum. So they were outside at recess time, and she had some gum in her mouth. And her teacher decided to make her run. She also had asthma, to run around the field maybe about 5 times because she was chewing gum on the playground. So of course I had to go up there. And I just went up there and I said, I'm going to the school board and this and that, because I'd already sent a doctor's slip saying that she had asthma and she could not run, you know, for long periods of time. That turned out to be so nice, because the teacher, in turn, just because I went up there. So it's important for us to show our faces and not just believe what our kids say, but also listen to the teacher. It's two sides of it. And so she said she was sorry, and then later she wanted to advance her. She wanted to skip her to the next grade. And I said, well, if you do that, when she gets to college, she will be so young, and I don't want her skipped. You know, at that time, her grades were very good. I said, I don't want you to skip her to another grade, advance her. I want her to go through all the grades. And that turned out nicely, because a lot of the teachers had not been exposed long enough to really know how to deal with the situation.
In reference to what took place with other stores, the Five and Dimes, as they were called, and places like Rucker Rosenstock's, Were there picket lines and sit-ins set up there?
Yes, one that sticks out in my mind that's kind of, it makes me laugh sometimes, was the five and dime store. I think it was called Woodworth. And my oldest daughter was she just loved to go in there and get a hot dog. And I could not explain to her that we could not sit. And I said, we can buy the hot dog, but we have to come out. And oh, she would come out and she would just throw a temper tantrum because she could not sit on those, they had like high stools at the bar in there. And the food was real good, so that's one story about a five and dime. The other, they put a picket line around there, and no one was going in there. For some reasons, they knew when the picketers were coming, so what they would do is rope off the food court so no one could eat, or close the store. And that was something that we knew then that we were really advancing.
Were there many people in terms of the citizens of Petersburg involved in the civil rights struggle in Petersburg?
Oh, yes. They had, in the beginning of the movement, it snowed so badly that night when they had the first meeting that they formed a Petersburg organization. And they did not think that people were going to come out because it would have been very hard for them to get there. And the church was packed, and this meeting was at Zion Baptist Church on Byrne Street. After that, as I said before, we were so organized, and you could depend on other people to help you. And there were people who were having meetings in their homes, and when they said there was going to be a meeting, most of the Petersburgers came out. It was really a lot of support behind the movement. And I think by that's how we gained so much in the city. We have not gone all the way. We are not where we should be. But we have come a long ways in the movement in this city.
In addition to the picketing and the sit-ins, do you recall any specific situation that helped bring the people out on that snowy night in Petersburg? Did we have any arrests that had taken place in Petersburg at that time?
That I can't really remember exactly what brought us out. Something had to happen that would cause such a mass meeting. And that time, Martin Luther King had not come on the scene in Petersburg. But it had to be something that happened, and I really can't remember what it was that brought most of the Petersburg people out.
Were any of the ministers in Petersburg involved in the struggle?
Oh, yes. At First Baptist at that time, which is, I'm a member of First Baptist Harrison Street, and that is the oldest African-American congregation in this country. At that time, we had a minister by the name of Reverend Reed, and he was very much involved in the movement. I can remember one time when someone was jailed, and we went down, I think it was Reverend Reed, and we went down and sang on the courthouse steps. So he was very much involved. Reverend Y.T. Walker, who was really, really involved, and I was fortunate enough to see him on this past Sunday. And he was going through some of the old African music in our choir, just sang like, he would start us off and we would kind of repeat, and that was just a wonderful program. But he was very, very into the movement when he was a minister of Guildfield. That's Reverend Dr. Y.T. Walker.
Do you recall whether or not Reverend Walker and any of the other ministers participated in an effort to try to integrate the Petersburg Public Library?
I can't recall. I can't recall it. It may have been that they did. At a certain point, I was just more into like the picketing, taking people down to vote, and that I don't really remember any of them involved in the school situation.
Was the library, to your knowledge, the public library, segregated at that time?
Yes, it was. The going in the front door, we were not we as Negroes were not allowed to go into the front door of the library, but we have to go around like the annex part, which was around on the side and like down in the basement.
Did you ever have that experience in terms of going into that particular door in the library?
Yes, I did.
How about your children?
No, they did not.
Was Reverend Walker and Reverend Reed involved, to your knowledge, in terms of helping to integrate that library?
I think that Reverend Reed and Reverend Walker was involved in that.
Do you recall whether or not at that point any outsiders, if you will, as they were called, came to Petersburg to help?
Oh yes, there were lots of outsiders that came to Petersburg. There were people from New York, and there were whites that came to help us, and they were just as busy helping us, and almost just they felt like one of us because they were dedicated to what they were doing. And I was fortunate enough to, like, say, we would take turns to fix snacks for them. They would help us take people down to vote, to register to vote. And at that time, there was a poll tax test. And they would also go from door to door, knocking on doors to try to gain more voters.
Do you recall whether or not during that period of time Martin Luther King visited Petersburg?
Oh yes, I remember there was the first SCLC convention, which Martin Luther King organized, was held at First Baptist Church, Harrison Street. As I said before, that's the church that I belong. And there was a dinner given for him. Many times he came here and walked the streets. There was a dinner given for him at Forest View. I don't know whether they are still there or not. But at that time, because we were not able to go into many restaurants, Forest View had a beautiful dining room. It was the proprietors were black, and that was where they would have the dinner for Martin Luther King, and many of us working in the movement would have dinner with him. They also had like mass meetings, and Martin Luther King came over to Virginia State, at that time, Virginia State College.
Do you recall whether or not any of the students from Virginia State College came to Petersburg to participate in the movement?
Yes, they did. Some of them were working in the field office, and some of them did come to picket with us.
Were there any other types of problems that you know of that developed in reference to Petersburg and the picketing and sit-ins?
I cannot remember any serious problems. It seemed as though, because it was a nonviolent movement, and it seems as though whites here in Petersburg were a little different than the ones in the Deep South, that it seems as though they respected the point of us picketing. And some of them may have thought that we were only trying to gain what we were supposed to have anyway. So I do not remember any real serious problems like other places in this country had in Petersburg. I think they accepted the fact because they felt like we were winning and we weren't going to turn back.
You mentioned nonviolence in terms of the movement in Petersburg. Mm-hmm. Do you recall how the people were convinced that it really should be a nonviolent movement, as Dr. King had preached on many occasions?
Well, most of the people, as I mentioned before, the city was, we had assigned each area of the city with a ward leader. I was chosen by SCLC and sent to Dorchester Academy, which was in Georgia, to study and to learn about the nonviolent movement. Dorchester Academy they had a dorm for the male and a dorm for the females. And our sessions were like from early in the morning until 12, we'll stop to eat. And after that, it was sessions all day, classes all day, and classes in the evening until dinner. And then after dinner, classes, and then you would go to bed, and you had certain times to get into bed. It was nothing but teaching us nonviolence. At that time, Andrew Young was one of the instructors. Dorothy Cotton, who was a young lady at that time who lived in Petersburg and had given up her job and everything and gone there to be one of the teachers. Jose Williams was one of the teachers. And when we came back, we were supposed to, within these different areas, have meetings to try to teach people who could not read and write how to be able to recognize the questions on the poll tax test so they would be able to become voters. And this nonviolent movement that we had been taught, we were supposed to bring it back to the city and teach it to everybody who was in these different areas across the city. Like Blanford was First Ward, and areas over in Bunkers Hill was Second Ward, and they were like in different wards, and each one of those wards had a ward leader. And that was a very exciting and wonderful thing when we came back. And many people who couldn't read and write, they were able to pass the test that was given in order to vote. And of course, later on, that test was just outlawed, the poll tax test.
Do you recall any of the churches who were actually involved? I know you mentioned First Baptist Harrison Street, and you mentioned Zion Baptist, where the first mass meeting was held on the night when it was really snowing. Were there any other churches in Petersburg that were involved?
Yes, I think Gillfield was involved also, because at the time, Y.T. Walker was the pastor of Gillfield, so Gillfield was involved.
Do you recall, as far as the movement in Petersburg was concerned, any effort on the part of the police department in Petersburg becoming involved in attempting to stop any of the action that was going on and being put forth by the African Americans at that time?
I don't, I do not recall any incident where the police just, harmed anyone. I think it was like the time when they were out and the picketers were marching around certain buildings. They had the dogs to frighten them, I think. Now, some of the dogs may have pulled at some pants legs or something, but no one that I know of was hurt.
Do you know of any of the facilities in the city of Petersburg that were not segregated in relationship to theaters or stores where you were talking about people trying to go in and sit at a lunch counter and eat? Were there other stores that were segregated or other facilities that were segregated, restaurants?
At that time, I think all the restaurants were segregated, except for the ones that were owned by African Americans. And all of the movie theaters, the two on Sycamore Street, if I can remember, we could not sit on the main floor. We had to sit in the balcony. There were two around Halifax Street, one on Harrison Street and one on Halifax Street, which was Jim Theater and Barney's Theater, that really was supposed to have been for African Americans, but did not show very good movies. In order to see like a real good movie, you would have to go down on Sycamore Street and you would have to sit in the balcony.
Did you ever experience that kind of action, if you will, as far as theaters were concerned?
Yes, I did. And it seemed as though, and I can't speak for other African Americans, but I know the feeling I had when I had to pay the same money that whites were paying, and I had to sit upstairs. But it was a situation where if you wanted to see the movie, that's where you had to sit. And I think what happened in the city of Petersburg, we just got tired of the type of treatment. And I just think we did a wonderful job in turning the city around. Many places that they said would never, blacks would never come. Now they are even named after an African American.
As far as the medical facilities were concerned at that time in the city of Petersburg, do you recall whether or not there was any difference in terms of the Petersburg hospital as it relates to where blacks or African Americans would have to go in terms of being treated medically as compared to whites who would go in for similar treatment?
Yes, but I didn't have any experience in being admitted to the hospital at that time. Petersburg Hospital at one time was segregated to the point they had one floor for blacks. And then if all the beds were occupied, then they would put blacks in the hallway. I had the opportunity to see this, but I did not have, I was not hospitalized at that time.
Did you by chance have an opportunity to go to Washington, D.C. for the March on Washington?
Yes, I did. And it's one of the most wonderful experience I have had in the movement, the feeling of the March on Washington.
later on during the movement, of course, Martin Luther King was assassinated. Do you recall any specific incidents in terms of Petersburg at that time?
No, not really. I think that I think there are some wonderful people in the city of Petersburg. And I think with good leadership, they come together in love. And now, whites also join us in efforts to make the city a better place. I do not remember any incidents that happened here in the death of Martin Luther King that, unlike the terrible things that happened up north, the looting and stuff like that, it did not happen here.
Can you think of anything else as far as Petersburg is concerned that happened as a result of the city being segregated and African Americans not being able to fully participate in the city itself, really?
Yes, I two come to mind. One is Lee Park, where there is a tennis court there now. At one time was segregated. We really couldn't go there to play any tennis at all. And now we're able to go to Lee Park. Wilcox Lake, I think the owner said that blacks would never, ever be on the grounds of Wilcox Lake. And now it's named after an African American. And I must say that I'm using African American, I'm using black, and I'm using Negro. Because at different times when we started out, we were Negroes. And somewhere down the line, now we are in between there, we're called blacks. And then now we're called African Americans. So when I'm speaking, I sometimes try to speak in what we were called at that time.
If we might back up for just a moment to another situation as far as the schools were concerned. When the schools were segregated in Petersburg, do you recall or are you aware of situations where at Peabody High School, as an example, that there was a difference in terms of what was being taught or the type of materials and equipment that were available for the black teachers and the black students as compared to Petersburg High School?
I think that we were getting second best. I think that the teachers were they were understaffed, but yet they did so much, and they produced some very smart people in the time when there were no computers and no cafeteria. So I feel that in the when we were in segregation, a whole lot of things that we were behind in because we did not have the equipment to use. I think the books were different, the reading material different, and I'm not sure of that, but I'm thinking that that's what happened, but yet the children had a desire to grasp everything that they could. So the school system put out some very smart people under the conditions that they did not have the proper things to use.
How do you feel today in reference to the conditions in the city of Petersburg as compared to the segregated era?
I feel that I don't know what has happened, but it is very is very sad what is happening like in the school systems. When all of the modern technology is there, and now the school systems are getting computers and all of this. So there is a change, like it's several generation gaps. It seems that even though the kids are intelligent and very smart, they're not into, not all of them, most of them are not into really grasping everything that they can when they have many more things out there to grasp. It seems like the interest in excelling is not there as much. As long as some of them can be like on a level and they may be able to go higher, that they're satisfied. Like a student who could be an A student is satisfied if they're a B student or a C student. So I think it's been a whole lot of change, and it could be there are so many other things that's catching the children of today's mind, the television with all kinds of things going on, all kinds of profanity, the music, the style of dressing has a whole lot to do with it. So it saddens me to see where we're standing now as a people.
Does it appear to you that the population, the number of whites versus the number of blacks in the city of Petersburg has changed as it relates to whites moving out of the city of Petersburg?
Yes, I think it has changed. I think that whites are really moving out. It's like a white flight. And that can be done as soon as a black move into the neighborhood in some cases. So we're really losing a whole lot of whites in the city of Petersburg, which is kind of sad. And I think the purpose is, I think the reason for that is when a black family move near them, it's almost like they are afraid, because some cases they judge all of us the same. They feel threatened, they feel afraid, and that's why they move, I believe. When there are some white families that they may need to be afraid of also. But then when you look at the situation, we as blacks, according to somebody who's moving in the neighborhood, if they're rowdy and they're carrying on and they have cars, we are concerned too. So the situation is, if they want to run, if whites want to run and move out of the city of Petersburg, that's not really going to keep them from one day looking up and having a black neighbor, because blacks are able to move right on out to Prince George or move right on out to Chesterfield, and that's a good thing, you know. But it may be a little segregation in that, because a lot of times blacks are not shown the houses that whites are shown in Prince George and Chesterfield. Sometimes they're running a little higher than what the white pay for, you know. So it's still some segregation going on.
Well, Mrs. Bethea, I certainly appreciate the fact that you've taken time today to come and talk to us about your experiences and how you believe the situation has changed or not changed. So with that in mind, again, thank you very much, and we look forward to speaking with you again.
Thank you, Mr. Fauntleroy.
Thank you.
I enjoyed it.
Thank you. But this concludes our interview, and we will, of course, continue to move on and take advantage of what's there and cause other things to happen. Thanks.
Thank you.